it's important that you have different types of partners and different types of relationships, because sometimes one will not be able to feed you what the other can. And you'll start to suck one relationship dry because you are expecting that relationship to do everything for you, when no one relationship is meant to do everything for you. And yes, this is not just romantic. This is business. When you expect your job and your coworkers to also be your therapist and your social life and your financial help and planner, that's very unhealthy. That's very unhealthy. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of I'll Just Let Myself In with your girl, Lish Speaks. Listen, this week we're going to be talking about something that is ever present in my life, which is what I try to do generally. I try to keep these episode topics real, relevant, based on what I'm actually learning and experiencing in my life. And so this week we're going to be talking about partnership. The name of this episode is Into Partnership. But you guys know how we do. If you're not new here, we have one of the best segments in podcasts, and it's called What I'm Stepping In, where we talk about what sneakers I'm wearing this week, and y'all know the drill. If you like them, we're going to tell you to go get you some. This week, I'm stepping in a pair of South Beach LeBron 9s. This is an old school sneakerhead shoe, okay? This was before everybody was a sneakerhead. You were really in the shoes. You had these shoes. I was lucky enough to get a pair maybe 2 years after they actually came out. I think they came out in 2012. I've had these shoes for a long time. You can probably see that based on the close-up. But yeah, I love this shoe. First of all, pink is one of my favorite colors. It's just an incredible shoe. It reminds me of a nostalgic time in sneakers where you really had to care. You really had to care about sneakers to want certain shoes. But yeah, I kept them in pretty good condition. They're doing all right. I don't wear them very often, but these are my South Beach LeBron 9s. And y'all know the drill. If you like them, go get you some. All right, so this episode, as I said, is entitled Into Partnership. And it's inspired by my life. My husband and I are co-founders of Blame Media, and that's where we do our podcast. That's where we create our content. That's how we come up with what we want to be in the world of entertainment and of media. And being married and being Christians, there are a lot of standards that we have to govern how we treat each other, how we partner. And I realized that the truth is, if you're partnering with anyone, whether it be a spouse, a friend, a business partner, a colleague, there are just certain things that I find very important in that relationship, in that partnership. The scripture that I love, right, and it's shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who reads the Bible, but in case you don't, which, welcome, you know what I mean? Welcome. We're going to do a lot of that up in here. The scripture that really encourages me with this topic is Ecclesiastes 4. In verse 9, it says, 2 are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if 2 lie down, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. And so this scripture really refines my whole view of partnership constantly, because I have to remember that it is truly a privilege to be in partnership. It's a privilege to be in partnership with my spouse, but it's a privilege to be in partnership with the many people that I work with, that I learn from, that I collaborate with, and that I will, God willing, in the future. And so there are a couple of things that are really, really important to me. And I really tried to narrow this down to like, here are the top 3 things about partnership. I couldn't do it. There were too much. It was too much information, too many gems and things that I've learned over the last couple of years about partnership, and even things that when I really started to write out my notes and think through what has worked for me in the past and what hasn't worked for me in the past, it was just so much to share. So buckle up. If you are in partnership with someone in any way, shape, or form, be it business, relational, spiritual, I believe that this podcast is going to help you. First off, you have to understand that partners are important. I think this society that we live in, I think social media, we just live in a time where you can really fool yourself into thinking you don't need partnership. Like you can really fool yourself into thinking you don't need friends. You can really fool yourself into thinking, you can cut everybody off as soon as they don't do something that you like. You can fool yourself into believing that partnership is not important and that partners are not important. And one of the things that I think the enemy is so crafty at, especially in this generation, but today and yesterday are the same. So this is nothing new. It's convincing us that we don't need people because the word says we're 2 or more gathered, right? So if the word says we're 2 or more gathered, there I am, God says, then of course the enemy would try to get us to not be gathered. And the cool thing about marriage, which is why the devil hates marriage, is there is a built-in 2 or more, right? Where 2 or more gather, where 2 or more come into agreement. You have a built-in 2 or more with you and your partner. So of course, he's not going to want you to be on the same page. He's not going to want you to partner. And so my conviction is that I'm not going to aid the enemy, right? He's already going to try and jack that up. I'm not going to be, an accomplice. I'm going to do what I got to do to make sure that my partnerships are intact. And even with friendships, it is so important. I talk about this a lot. So if you're a frequent listener, you already know how I feel. But if you're new here, I talk a lot about friendship because I know that friendship has saved me so many times. Friendship has pulled me out of dark places so many times. And friendships have been my accountability so many times. And so even in marriage, some people get married and I'm not knocking nobody. If your spouse is your only friend and, there's a lot of jokes about that on the internet. Like it's usually a joke with wives because men keep their friends. That's another topic for another day. But a lot of times women, when we get in relationships, we start abandoning friendships. And we don't always see that those friendships, although they cannot take precedence over your spouse, are unique and needed. There are things that women understand about women that men, I don't care how much he loves you. I don't care how much he honors you. I don't care he will never get it. There are things that men don't have the capacity for that women do. I laugh all the time. One of my best friends, she will call me when something's going on with her boyfriend, and I'll talk to her if something's going on with me and my husband, and we'll laugh because we're like, as much as they love us, they would not sit through an hour of what we're talking. Like, I can talk to my best friend about something ad nauseam, and I can call her every day with the same situation, and she will listen, and my husband would listen, but at some point he'd be like, okay, now baby, now what we gonna do? And my friend does the same, but it's different. It's just different. Women are just different. We get each other differently. And so you cannot despise partnership and relationships. And it's important that you have different types of partners and different types of relationships, because sometimes one will not be able to feed you what the others can. And you'll start to suck one relationship dry because you are expecting that relationship to do everything for you when no one relationship is meant to do everything for you. And yes, this is not just romantic. This is business. When you expect your job and your coworkers to also be your therapist and your social life and your financial help and planner, that's very unhealthy. That's very unhealthy. Like, We cannot expect to get everything from one place. And so partners and partnership is very important. One of the things that I think about, because, when, let me backtrack. When I was dating my husband, he knew that I was a creative person. He knew that I was into all sorts of every facet of the arts. I'm into all of it. Our first date was at a museum. I'm into it. When we first started talking, I had just put out a EP. So he knew I was a musician and I was a rapper and I was into that. And he's heard me speak publicly. So he kind of knew, what I was about. But it's very different to know that someone is into something and to care about what they are into. And I'll never forget, when I really knew that my husband was like the one, like he could really be with me in that part of me. Because let's be very clear. Some people are married and if their spouse is into something they're not into, they're like, that's your thing. I don't care nothing about it. Right. And that might work for like, I don't know, a game or clothes or something. But something that is deeply embedded into your personality, the person can't just not care about it. So we'll get into that later. But when I really knew, like my husband he could really be the one. He can hang with every facet of me. Was Valentine's Day, our first Valentine's Day together. We were long distance, so he was still living in New York, and I was living in Atlanta, and I flew to New York for Valentine's Day. And we both wanted to make Valentine's Day very special. It was my first Valentine's Day in a relationship in years, and his as well. And so we both wanted to make Valentine's Day very special. To this day, we both put on for every holiday. It's not like, oh, well, I don't really have to do nothing for him, and he don't really have to do nothing for me, or we don't have to do gifts. No, we go all out. Christmas, birthdays, Valentine's Day, we go all out. So Valentine's Day comes along, and he took me to see The Lion King. I had never seen The Lion King on Broadway, and I'm a big Broadway person, but I had just never seen The Lion King. And so this is right after COVID. This is 2022, February 2022. So this is when Broadway, my first time back to Broadway, being that I had lived in Atlanta at the time. So we go see The Lion King, and easy road. You know how it goes, right? I start bawling. And I'm not talking about like a little tear. I'm like crying, right? Because the arts make me cry. I cry at concerts. I cry. These things feel otherworldly to me. They feel spiritual to me. So when the animals are coming down, it's not just, oh, this is nice. I feel something, and it evokes an emotion. And my husband, my boyfriend at the time, was like, he was shocked. He was shocked, but he was so enamored by it. Like when we left the theater, he was like, baby, I love how connected you are to I love that about you. I love that you feel things so deeply. Like, I'm so fascinated by you. And he tells me that to this day. I'm so fascinated by you. You're just a fascinating person. And I knew then he could hang. Because here's the thing. When it comes to partners, especially a partner in business or projects, a passion project, they cannot think what moves you is stupid. Like there's some people, and I've dated people in the past who have been like, yo, why you crying? Like, yo, you just be doing too much. Like, you crying? It is not that serious. Like, or would have laughed at me for crying. But he gets it. We went to a Stevie Wonder concert recently. Soon as Stevie opened his mouth, I'm crying. I can't even help it. I can't help it. This is Stevie Wonder. Stevie has been singing since the 60s. We don't know how much longer we have Stevie. I'm going to see Stevie. He takes me to see Stevie. As soon as Stevie opened his mouth, I just start crying. And he's just looking at me, smiling. He's even getting a little emotional just from me getting emotional. And that makes me feel so safe. So when I have some grand idea and some big thing and I'm passionate about something, I'm not afraid to bring it to him because I know he's not going to look at me like I'm crazy, even though he would not define himself as a creative person. If you are single and you are creative, you are an influencer, you are an actor, you're a writer, you're a singer, you're a rapper, you need to be with someone who likes you and who is fascinated by you. Now, they don't have to be like you, because that's a thing we fall into. Oh, this person has to be like me. They have to like what I like. They have to like to go where I have to. No, they just have to like you, really like who you are, right? They have to be enamored by that part of you. They can't think it's stupid or inferior. You know, my husband is a numbers guy. He's a tech guy. He's a science guy, right? He could easily be like, oh my gosh, you in these museums. We got another museum. Oh my gosh, you in these plays. Why do you got, you know, he never went to a Broadway play before we dated. You know what I mean? He wasn't frequenting museums and exhibits. But because he is enamored by that part of me, he's interested, right? And we don't do every single thing together because I like to experience some things alone, right? I need to have my moments. But it's never like a push to have him come with me, and vice versa for the things that he loves and likes. You know, it's really important that when you are partnering with someone, be it romantically or in business, you have a respect for the things each other cares about. I respect the things my husband cares about, even if I don't understand them, even if I can't talk the talk, even if I don't know the jargon. I'm like, okay, so now explain that to me. Explain it to me like I'm 5. Okay, got it. You know what I mean? It's important to me that he knows that I don't think what he values is below what I value. So that is why we are able to partner in business together. And now I'm going to focus a little bit more on partnering in business. You know, as you think about partnership with someone, especially in the realm of business, ask yourself, what is the most important thing to you? You know, I had to ask myself, what is the most important thing to me in partnership? And for me, although a lot of things are important, it is work ethic. I cannot be in partnership with anyone who will not work as hard as or harder than me. It's actually one of the reasons that I don't have a co-host on this podcast. Not so much that I just could not find anybody who works as hard as me, like I'm the hardest working person in the world. No, but it would have been work for me to find someone that I know, that I trust, that I know is going to show up, that I know is going to put in the same amount of effort, time, and money as me, that's going to show up personality-wise, although they didn't have to be just like me, but with the same passion as me. When I thought about that, I said, yeah, you know what? Let's do this by ourselves, at least on screen. I have lots of help behind the scenes. But, you know, on screen, it was important, you know, that I show up the way in this podcast, the way that I wanted to. So I don't have a co-host for that reason. People have asked me, like, how do you do this all on your own? It's a lot to carry a whole show on your own. I would rather that. And that's a lesson. Sometimes we partner with people. I'm trying to keep it business, but child, the relationship business thing just flippity flop. Sometimes we partner with people just so that we won't be alone, and they are actually holding us back. Because what's happening is you're doing the work for both people. And it would just be easier if you were there, being able to do what you want, how you want. Because guess what happens? When you have a co-host or a partner, now you got to run things by them. Now you got to have meetings. Now you have to agree on things. And if you're the harder working person in that relationship, you are getting permission from, meeting with, talking to a person who is not putting in the work that you're putting in. So now you're having to do double the work by having to talk about it and still do it. As opposed to if it was just you, you could do the things you want to do. And so it's important that if you're going to partner with somebody, you partner with somebody who will work just as hard as you, or harder. It's important to have a partner whose strengths are your weaknesses and vice versa, right? A lot of times when people are trying to partner, the struggle is because they have the same strengths and they have the same weaknesses, right? You'll get two people together who are both charismatic and fun and, you know, can sell something, but neither one of them are good at the finances. so the finances are in shambles, right? Or they may be good at the finances, but they're both terrible at marketing. So the business is right, but no one knows that is happening. They can't get a deal to save their lives, right? You have to make sure that your partner's strengths are your weaknesses. In Blame Media, my husband and I have very defined roles, right? And one of the things that really, really makes our partnership work is that we have different strengths and weaknesses. His strengths really lend to order, right? Things being in order, things being done the way they're supposed to be done when we said that we were going to get them done, right? My strengths are creativity, being flexible, thinking on my feet, being able to pivot. Both those things are very much needed because I don't care how much planning and order you have, there are going to be times where something is not working out. There's going to be times where something don't look right and you need to change that and this is not working. And my ability to be flexible makes that lighter, right? While his ability to plan makes me not have to worry. So I can come on set good to go because I know that every possible thing that needed to be taken care of has been to the best of his ability. One of my strengths for this particular piece of our media is that I'm an avid researcher, right? I show up to set. Research is real words on these cards, right? I sit down, I watch a lot of interviews, I listen to how people ask questions. If you've listened to some of my interviews, a lot of people on my interviews will say, no one has asked me that, or I haven't spoken about this before, or, I'm getting emotional. Every time I get with you, I get emotional. There's a reason for that, right? I study the greats. I sit down and I watch Diane Sawyer and Barbara Walters and Oprah. I want to know when they ask a question that evokes emotion, why did it evoke emotion? How did it evoke emotion? I want to know when to not overtalk someone, but when to step in because they're having a hard time making their point or they can't find the words. I want to know, and I could go on and on about this. I'm actually eventually going to do an episode on how I prepare for podcasts because a lot of us just be getting on the mic and talking. No shade, just saying. But I do that. That's a strength of mine. So my husband, as he's behind these mics, and when we do hire out and we have other people behind these cameras and microphones, we're not stopping and starting 100 times. When it's time to go edit, it's pretty seamless because when I sit down, I know what the heck I'm doing. I'm not just sitting here trying to make it work and piece it together and talking about whatever. I'm actually prepared, right? These are things that if they are, a strength in one area and a weakness in the other, it can really make something gel together. There are parts of this podcast that I probably way too frequently remind my husband and my manager that only I can do. Don't ask me to do this other stuff because no one else can do this part for me, right? I can be a little bit of a diva sometimes. But it's true. There are parts of what my husband does, of what my manager does, that only they can do. And so it is important that each person wants to show up in excellence because when we start having to fill in for each other, the job might get done, but it's not going to get done well because that's not my role, right? If I decided, I don't want to host the podcast today, so my husband got to get up here and host, it'll be a good podcast, but it won't be, I'll just let myself in with Lish Speaks because he's not Lish Speaks. If I decided, he can't do it, I'm just going to throw these cameras on, it'll look all right. It'll look all right. Some of y'all see my content I do for Instagram. Sometimes it's blurry. I just be doing my best, honey, But because this is what he does, he makes it excellent. And so partnership and understanding strengths and weaknesses and who's supposed to be doing what when is important. And it also is important to understand who is accountable versus who is responsible, right? So if I am accountable for something getting done, it doesn't necessarily mean I have to be responsible for it getting done. And that's a really important part of partnership and delegation, right? When you're hiring out vendors or you're reaching out to people for help. If I am responsible for preparing for the podcast, or preparing for a show. God willing, I have a show one day, right? I may have a team full of researchers, and right, this is like my dream, y'all. I may have a team. I can see the room. I'll have a team of people who research topics, and we will sit down and we'll talk about it. But at the end of the day, I am going to be responsible for conveying the message to my audience, right? That is my responsibility. Nobody can do that for me, right? And so it's important to have those conversations, when you are partnering with someone. Okay, what are you responsible for versus what are you accountable for? Because if you're accountable for something, you could get anybody to do it. My husband is accountable for making sure that Blame Media, puts out this particular podcast. So that means he could hire someone else to do it. But once he decides, hey, I'm going to film and edit, which is where we are now, he has now made himself responsible for what you're seeing, right? And that can go in and out. Another really important thing about partnership is that seasons change. So being able to communicate with your partner in business and relationship when something needs to shift, when something that we've been doing is no longer working, or something that we said we were going to do, we haven't started and it's holding us back, like having these conversations. And that brings me to my next point about communication. A lot of people are together, but they're not partners. A lot of people work together, but they're not in a partnership. And it shows because partnership demands communication. It demands, you cannot be in partnership with someone and not talk to them, right? Like you cannot be in partnership with someone and not consistently communicate about what you need and what they need. One of the things I love most about how we are running our small little engine that could, is that we meet weekly and we talk through the needs, and we talk through, okay, what is happening? What is best? Most likely by the time you guys see this, we will have already announced our partnership with Holy Culture Radio, and which we are on Monday nights from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so make sure you're checking that out. But, we had a lot of conversations about that deal, about how to get a deal like that before we had it, about the type of people we would want to partner with, about the type of people that we would do business with and the type of people we wouldn't do business with, right? Like having these conversations and being on the same page about what we want made it so that when opportunities began to present themselves, we were ready, right? We were on the same page. We were in agreement. We were in alignment. And because we run this business with the management of my manager, Mark, we had to have conversations with him as well about our vision and what we want and what we believe. And I only would have a manager who is aligned with me as well. Having conversations, and my manager started out as my producer. He's still my producer, just in case I ever want to make some music again. But he is my friend. He's my brother. But we communicate. We trust and respect each other. And not just on business stuff. We communicate generally, right? It's important to me that anybody I do business with is on the same wavelength as me in terms of the things that we are ingesting. So when I send my manager, my friend, my brother, when I send Mark a sermon, he listens to it. When he sends me a sermon, I listen to it. When he sends me a podcast, I listen to it. When I send him a podcast, he listens to it. You know why? Because we understand that there's a reason this person wants me to see this. And we listen to it quick, mostly the same day, usually the same day, if not the next day. Same thing with my husband. When my husband sends me, hey, you need to watch this video on YouTube. They're talking about, making the most out of this AI product or making the most out of this camera lens. I watch it. Not 10 days later, not 20 days later, not because I actually respect the person I'm partnering with, and I want to make sure that whatever information they believe I need and they're taking the time to take it, I'm taking it. Same thing. I send my husband stuff. He watches it almost immediately most of the time, depending on our schedule. But I can honestly say within 48 hours, you're usually watching what the other person sent us. We're on the same page. We're communicating. We're being influenced by the same ideas. These things are important in a partnership. It's important that you partner with people who think the way that you do on the things that matter, right? And for this, I mean morally, right? They have a moral compass that is the same or very similar to yours. Obviously, you need to think differently in some ways because that's what makes the business work. But, I can never be in business with someone who just morally is very different than me. It wouldn't work for me. In fact, I have amazing friends that are smart and talented and witty and even have business savvy and just great people, amazing people. But out of all my friends, I would only go into business with one of them. And they know who they are. And the reason is because we see the world similarly. We have similar morals. We treat people similarly. We respect each other's time. We value one another. Like, there are just things that I know I wouldn't have to deal with. Because here's the thing. Any business relationship, you're going to bump heads at some point. You're going to disagree. You're going to have issues, right? But the type of person that you're dealing with says a lot. I remember Maya Angelou saying one time in an interview, you really want to know someone, see them under pressure. See them when their luggage gets lost. See them when they show up to the hotel and their reservation is not there. Like, people have a way about them of handling things. And for me, that way needs to align with my way in order for me to be it doesn't have to be the same. Right? It needs to be harmonious. It needs to align, but it doesn't have to be the same, but it can't be the other side of the spectrum. And so for me, it just matters that there's a mutual respect, right? There's a reciprocity in relationship. It's not I'm doing a whole lot and this person is doing very little, and that if I don't reach out, I don't hear from them, or if I don't put the business plan together, it won't happen. It would be mutual. And it's the same way I feel with my husband. It is important that when you're in business with someone, when you partner with someone, they are on the same type of time as you, and that leads me to this idea about being able to disagree without being disagreeable. As I said a moment ago, when you're in business with somebody, you're going to have disagreements. There are going to be things where you don't see it the same. You don't feel the same about it. Even though the two of you can have the same morals, the same code, the same convictions, you're two different people. So you'll view things differently. And you need to be able to disagree without being disagreeable, without becoming disrespectful, without shutting down, without being dismissive, without being easily frustrated, without leaving, right? These are things that are really important. I have stopped working with people who I think very highly of, who I think are smart, who I think are gifted, who I think, literally can build a Tower of Babel if they put their mind, like just great people, because they don't know how to be disagreed with. Everything can't turn into this big thing. Everything can't be an hour-long debate back and forth if I don't agree with you. I can't do that in this age and stage of my life, right? And so sometimes it's just better to say, you know what? We probably should not do business together. And that's okay. I love you. I think you're great. You're amazing. For the sake of our friendship, let's not do business together. I've been in that place, because being able to be disagreed with is a skill. It's an art. There are plenty of times when, and I've talked about them on this podcast, where I have thought we should go in one direction and my husband has been like, I don't think so. And here's why. And we've been able to go back and forth in a calm, respectful, manner when one person is not so bent on things being their way that they can't let go. And it has been so healing, honestly, in a business relationship to be able to be disagreed with or be able to disagree with someone and it not turn into anything. Me and my manager, we talk through things, and sometimes he'll have a different perspective than me and I have a different perspective. And because we know the goal is the same, we have the same goal, we listen to each other differently. And I'll even, a lot of times I will back down. I'll be like, you know what? Let's try it your way. This is not a hill I'm willing to die on. Let's try it that way. Because there's been times where I've been very wrong, or times when neither one of us was wrong and there was just a different way to try it, or times when my way made sense for a season, but now we need to try it a different way. And so I think it's very important to be able to to disagree without becoming disagreeable, to disagree without becoming childish and petty, and without shutting down and saying, fine, but you don't take my advice, I'm not gonna say anything anymore, I'm not gonna help anymore. Like, people have walked away. People have walked away from things because their opinion or their advice or their suggestion wasn't taken. And you really can forfeit your eternal impact because you're worried about the fact that someone didn't take your suggestion this time. It doesn't mean they won't take it next time. You know what I mean? And you can even experience that in church. You can experience that at work. Like, you need to be able to be disagreed with. You need to be able to still be of service even when your suggestion is not taken. It's super important. The last thing I'll share, last two things I'll share about partnering are super important. One, I need partners who are curious. Curiosity is very important to me in partnership. And here's what I mean by that. A person who is not curious will be fine with you doing everything, with you coming up with every new idea, with you coming up with every marketing scheme, with you figuring out the answer to every problem. Why is this not working? Why is our audience not connecting? A person who is not curious will let you do all of that. Okay, cool. Well, let me know what you think. I could never do that. I need to be partners with someone who also cares, even if they don't have the skill or the they don't think about, things the way I do. I need someone who actually cares to try, to say, hey, I was thinking about this. I saw this video. Check this out. Maybe this is something we can do differently. Maybe this is something we need to work on. Recently my husband was like, I think we need to work on the titles of the podcast. Like, we can keep the theme of into, because, I'll just let myself in. So I like that title the episodes into this or into that. But when we put them on YouTube, maybe let's try talking, leading with the topic of the podcast that people can relate to, and then going into whatever the title is, the official title is. I'm like, that's a great idea, babe. Like, that's good. He's going to think about what AI solutions can help us. He may not be looking into whatever topics or segments that we're going to have, or creative this or that, right? But he's going to use his skill, what he is good at, what is natural to him, in order to make the podcast better, because he's curious. He's curious at how to get better at what he does. I cannot tell you the amount of hours this man has spent researching cameras, researching lenses, researching lights, researching how to use them, researching how to edit, all this stuff. Going back into the recesses of stuff he learned in high school and college in terms of tech to contribute to what we're doing. A curiosity that allows him to show up well. I am a very curious person. My curiosity shows up differently. I'm curious about people. I'm curious about the human experience. I'm curious about the arts. I'm curious about what makes people tick. I'm curious about why, John Coltrane still sells and streams the numbers that he does, right? What is it about that connected? Why can we watch a movie from 50, 60, 70 years ago, and still feel connected? Why? I'm curious about those things, right? I'm curious about why humans connect to the arts the way that they do. That informs the way that I show up, right? But the curiosity of a financial partner who says, okay, how can we make sure this podcast is lucrative? What can we do? Who can we partner with? What are the brands that would benefit from being mentioned on your podcast? That's also a curiosity, right? That's also a form of curiosity. So being in partnership with people who ask questions, who get advice, who look for mentorship. There are people in your life who are doing something that you really want to do, and you out here trying to just white knuckle it. Ask them. I can't tell you how many people I offer advice to that just will not ask me. And I'm like, I'm doing exactly what you're trying to do. Let me help you. At least ask me. These things are important. Curiosity is what will help you get to where you need to go. And last but not least, I think the biggest and most important part of partnership in any relationship, but specifically in the media, entertainment, influencer world, if you're going to partner in business with people, you have to make sure they love their role and they don't want your role. One of the biggest things that makes my partnerships work is that the people that I'm working with don't want to be me. They're like, oh, I could never do all of that. I could never sit up there, smile, kicking and cackling, asking one of these questions. Please. I don't want to be on nobody's stage. I don't want to be in front of anybody's camera. And it works. You know why? Because I don't want to do what they do. I don't want to sit down and figure out all the logistics and the numbers, and I don't want to edit, and I don't want to do none of that. I want to sit in front of this camera and laugh and have a good time and research my research and ask my questions. We don't want to do each other's things. So there's no jealousy. There's no frustration. There's no competition, because there is a level of understanding that, wow, what this person does is special and unique and important. I respect it. I revere it on some levels, but they got it. They're good. A lot of times in entertainment, and this can happen with friendships, this can happen in relationships. People will be jealous of what you have, of what you bring to the table. People will want to do what you're doing, but they're hiding that behind the fact that they're doing something else for you in the moment, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't be, I can't tell you how many PAs I know and, background actors want to be, they aspire to be something different, but they have accepted that this is where they are right now. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a deep-seated desire to be there, and almost an envy, as like, who are you? Why do you deserve it and I don't? Why do you have it and I don't have it? We got to be careful when partnering with people who don't accept their role and who want to be something that they're not. This has messed people's relationships up in partnering. And I've spoken to people who were like, all of this time, they really hated me. They were really jealous of me. They were jealous of my marriage. They were jealous of the money. They were jealous of this or that. And all this time, I'm thinking, we working together for the same thing. You got to really discern people's character and really discern, their motives. I remember Oprah saying the reason that her and Gail are able to be best friends is because Gail doesn't want her life. Gail doesn't look at her life and say, oh, I want that and I want. Now, Gail has done similar things. She has her own show. She does her own thing. She does her own interviews, but she didn't want Oprah's life in the time that she was doing that. And so it's important that you surround yourself in partnership and friendship, relationship, business with people who understand their role and don't want yours, who champion what you do, who celebrate what you do, who are proud of you, but are not envious of what you are doing. Ultimately, partnership's supposed to make things easier. Partnership's supposed to make things lighter. Partnership's supposed to do what the scripture said, which is, if one falls down, the other can help them up. But pity the man who falls and has no one help him up. If two lie down, they can keep warm. Partnership is supposed to be mutually beneficial. So if you are in partnership in any way right now, whether that be relational, business, spiritual, and you find that the only person benefiting is the other person, or the only person benefiting is you, and you need to do some introspection and you need to do, some changing and showing up better in that space, I really want to encourage you to let yourself into partnership in this way and see how much it changes your life. Listen, this has been another episode of I'll Just Let Myself In with your girl, Lish Speaks. I hope that this has encouraged you. If it has, please send it to someone else. Share it with someone else. Share it with the person you're in partnership with, or share it with the person you're going into partnership with. So you guys can begin to have a conversation about the type of partnership that you want. I always say, if you love this podcast, please share it. Please rate it. Please review it. Please tell me. Let me know how you feel about it. We also take letters in at speakers at lishspeaks.com. Is that the right address? Yes. I keep forgetting it. But we always take emails in at speakers at lishspeaks.com. It will really give you a chance, even if you want to just tell me how you feel about something. If you want a question, if you want it to be run on air and you want to remain anonymous, you can share that as well. But if you want to send in topics, things you would like me to talk about on the podcast, I would be so happy to receive those. But it is so encouraging for us to continue to meet together like this each week. Listen, I hope that something that I said today informs and influences the way that you partner in the future. And y'all know the drill. Meet us back, same time, same place next week. I just let myself in. Peace.